Bionicle Adventures 1 Mystery of Metru Nui. Written by Greg Farshidi. Narrated by Trajan M. Chapter 3. Ask a Gamatoran or a Komatoran, and they would say Tom Metru was the harshest, least hospitable spot in all of Metru Nui. The searing heat of the forges and the great furnace, the heavy smell of molten protodermis, the constant sound of crafters hammering away. To Matoran from the quieter districts, Tom Metru was a nightmare. Vakama, Toe of Fire, would have agreed with that opinion right now, if he'd had a moment to think. Instead, he was diving and rolling to avoid white-hot protodermis flowing from a vat high above. An accidental overflow or leak was always bad news, but in this case it was far worse than that. Vakama glanced up. Yes, the Morbazok vines were still there, trying hard to rip the protodermis vat off its chain and hurl it to the ground. If they succeeded, there might not be much left of this section of Tom Metru. The Toa's mind raced. Morbazok vines had never been seen this far inside of Metru. Protodermis vats on their way to a forge should never stall long enough for anything to grab hold of them. But both had happened, and just when Vakama arrived in search of a missing mask maker. Tomatoran workers were running for cover, but if enough hot protodermis hit the ground, there would be no place to hide. It would burn through anything in its path unless Vakama found a way to stop it. Right, sounds easy, thought the new Toa Metru. Only how do I do it? I can't keep ducking and dodging. The vat's too high to reach by climbing. Not that the Morbazok will let me get close enough anyway. Unless... Matau had made fun of his choice of a disc launcher for a Toa tool. But right now, Vakama felt it was the wisest decision he had ever made. He looked at the 3-digit code on one of his discs. The first digit identified where it was made, the second its power, and the third its power level. This was a level 5 freeze disc. Better still, the disc had been made in Metru, which meant it carried an extra surprise for the Morbazok vines. Vakama rolled, came up in a crouch, aimed, and let the disc fly. As he expected, the Morbazok vines reacted instantly, swiping at the spinning object. But Metru discs were made to swerve at high speed to avoid any obstacle. The Morbazok grasped only empty air as the disc flew onto its target. Impact! The disc hit the gears above the vat head-on, freezing them solid and stopping the tilt. The vines snaked back up to the vat, but recoiled violently when they touched the ice. Vakama took the hint. He launched another disc at one of the vines. When it struck, veins of frost began to travel the length of the blackened tendril. The other vines writhed frantically in the air. Then all of them retreated back through a crack in the ground. The Toa Metru of Fire let out a long sigh of relief. The forge was safe, and more importantly, he had learned that the Morbazok hated the cold. He was puzzling over what that might mean when the control room attendant came rushing over. "That was amazing," said the Tomatoran. "I thought we had seen the last of the Toa when Likhan disappeared. If you hadn't been here..." "I did what I had to do," said Vakama quietly. He wasn't used to being seen as a hero and wasn't sure if he would ever feel comfortable about being one. "What happened? I thought the vats never stopped moving." "Come and see," said the attendant grimly. Vakama followed him to the forge control center. The foreman pointed to an ugly burn on one of the panels. "That's what happened. Some 4-legged monster broke in and fried the controls with a burst of energy." Vakama knelt down for a closer look. Some of the components had been damaged, but they could be repaired. That was not half as interesting as the scattered protodermis dust he saw on the floor near the damaged portion. He had seen dust like this once before, on a visit to Metru, but this glittered in the light. It was only upon closer examination that he spotted the crushed Metru knowledge crystals mixed in with the dust. The Toa Metru glanced up at the attendant. "I think I can fix this, if you can do a favor for me. I'm looking for a mask maker named Nuri. He wasn't at his home or his forge. Have you seen him?" "Yes, he was here this morning," the attendant replied. "He was looking for a great mask he made. It was tossed and flawed, but he said someone told him the mask was fine. He wanted to retrieve it before it went into the furnace for meltdown. Did he find it?" "It's not here. Must still be on the reject pile, so I sent him over there. Nuri was talking pretty crazy, though. Said if he couldn't find the mask, he knew where there was a Kanoka disc that could make him the greatest mask anyone ever worn. Guess he's been working a little too hard." "Yes, I guess so," Vakama replied, not at all convinced Nuri was crazy. More likely, the Matoran was walking into a trap, or getting ready to spring one. The toe of fire thought hard as he walked. The walls of Nuri's home had been lined with tablets, souvenirs of his work. Each tablet showed an image of a Kanohi mask, and the Kanoka discs from which it had been made. One of the tablets had been smashed on the floor, and a failed attempt made to put it back together. The forge attendant had said Nuri had made a flawed mask. Vakama guessed it was the tablet featuring that mask that had been broken in anger. When Nuri heard the mask was in fact perfect, he tried to put the tablet back together before rushing off to find the Kanohi. That still left a few questions. Who had discovered that the mask was still a good one and notified Nuri? And was the note that Matoran had received the truth, or simply bait to lure him into a trap? Vakama hoped to find the answer at the huge, fenced-in lot just ahead. Its official name was the Protodermis Reclamation Center, but to every mask maker in Ta Metru, it was a graveyard. No matter how many hours of work had gone into a mask, a single tiny flaw could ruin it. Then it would be transported here, to sit on top of a pile of other broken, useless masks until it could be fed to the furnace and melted down. It was the one place no mask maker ever wanted to visit. A single guard stood at the gate. The bored look on his face disappeared when he saw Toa coming toward him. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Toa Vakama." It felt so strange to say it. "Toa Metru of Fire. I need to get inside." "I'm sorry, but I have orders from Taragaduma. No one is allowed in. I don't want trouble with the Vaki." "But you let Nuri in, didn't you? He's in danger, and I have to find him. Please, open the gate." "I can't. I could lose my job." Vakama frowned. This argument was taking too much time. The guard was obviously more afraid of the Vaki than he was of making a Toa angry. And why wouldn't he be? No Toa would ever harm an innocent. "Then I will open it for you," the Toa of Fire said. Concentrating harder than he ever had in his life, Vakama willed a narrow jet of flame from his hand. In an instant, it had melted the lock into slag. "You did your job. Now I have to try and do mine." The yard was quiet. Vakama walked past piles of Kanohi masks and other artifacts, all waiting behind the fences for their time in the great furnace. Some looked perfect to the naked eye, their flaws visible only to a truly skilled crafter. Others were badly mangled. So focused was he on scanning the damaged items that he almost tripped over something in his path. When he regained his footing, he saw it was a mask of shielding someone had left lying in the path. Vakama bent down and picked it up. It looked familiar somehow, but he couldn't quite place it. Then it struck him. The angle of the mask, the ridges around the eyepieces, these were marks of Nuri's work. Was this the mask the Matoran had been seeking, now cast aside as if it were worthless? Everyone seems to want that Kanohi today," said a Matoran behind him. Vakama turned to see the Reclamation Center caretaker approaching. "Nuri was here looking for it just a short while ago." "But he didn't take it with him?" asked Vakama. "Why not?" "Look for yourself. The mask has a hairline crack in the base," the caretaker replied, pointing to a barely visible flaw. "I've been doing this so long, I can spot a bad one from a long way away. Mask maker must have cooled it too fast. Anyway, Nuri took one look at it, threw it down, and left. He was muttering something about forging the most powerful Kanohi ever made and showing up some other crafter. Vakama, I think his name was." "Me? Why would he want to outdo me?" Vakama thought. "Sure, I had fewer masks wind up here, and Taragaduma did ask me to craft a special Kanohi for him, but I never knew Nuri would be so jealous of that. After all, I learned so much from him." "I guess masks aren't the only thing that can hide their flaws," the Toa of Fire said. "Do you have any idea where he's gone?" The caretaker handed over a tablet. "He dropped this on his way out." Vakama's eyes flew across the stone. There was no signature on the note, just some smudges of liquid protodermis. It read, "Nuri, come to the abandoned mask maker's house in the northern reaches. You will learn a valuable secret there. How to turn a great disc into a Kanohi mask that will live in legend. Come alone. Tell no one." Vakama's mind reeled for a moment. He could see Nuri surrounded by shadowy tentacles that were reaching for him, grabbing him, squeezing the breath from the Matoran. Somehow, the Toa knew that this danger was real, and it was happening now. The caretaker watched Vakama race off and shook his head. Then he turned to the pile of broken masks and said, "Everyone's in such a hurry. Everyone except me. And all you. We're not in a rush to get where we're going, right?" The Matoran laughed then, but Vakama was too far away to hear. The Toa of Fire scanned his surroundings. He couldn't believe anything could make Nuri come here. This was a place no Matoran ever wandered, not if they hoped to see the twin suns rise again. This had been one of the most active sections of Metru. Vakama could remember riding the chutes here to see friends just a short time ago, but it seemed like ages had passed. Now the whole neighborhood was desolate and abandoned, surrendered to the power of the Morbizak. Half the buildings were reduced to rubble, and the nest did not look much better. Vakama walked carefully, avoiding the chunks of solid protodermis that littered the street. Only the skittering of little Rahim on the wreckage broke the silence. Most of the Matoran who had lived here had fled, finding refuge with friends in the heart of the Metru. Those who had chosen to stay were never seen or heard from again. Taragaduma had declared the whole area off limits, but soon found he did not need to dispatch Vaki to guard the place. No Matoran wanted to travel here. Except Nuri, Vakama reminded himself. But even if he is here, I may be too late to save him. As if in answer, a voice shouted, "Help!" It came from an abandoned crafter's home far down the street. Vakama broke into a run, then stopped short when he saw the twin Morbizak vines slithering toward the same building. They were moving too quickly. He could never hope to outtrace them. "Help!" Vakama loaded his last disc into the launcher and hoped he was making the right decision. He had never used this particular kind of disc before, or even forged a mask from one. Its power was the least predictable and might make a bad situation worse. But there wasn't any other choice. The discs shot through the air and struck the first vine, then began a sweeping arc that would bring it back to Vakama. On its way, it clipped the second vine, just as the Toa Metru had hoped it would. Before his eyes, both vines began to shimmer and fade. Then they were gone, teleported somewhere else in Metru Nui. Vakama hoped he had not just created a greater danger for someone else to deal with. The door to the house was unlocked. As soon as it was opened, a cloud of protodermis dust flew out, blinding and choking Vakama. When he could see again, he discovered the way in was blocked by rubble. "Who's there? Help me! I'm trapped back here!" It was Nuri's voice, coming from somewhere beyond the pile of protodermis. The Morbizak vines had brought down the roof, and were no doubt getting ready to start on the walls when the Toa Metru showed up. For a moment, Vakama considered using his elemental power to melt through the obstacle, but his powers were so new, and he had too little control over them. Make a mistake and the whole district might burn. No, he would have to do it the hard way, block by block. Vakama removed one chunk of protodermis. When he took out a second, the rubble shifted, and more fell from the roof. "Hey, watch it!" Nuri shouted. "What are you trying to do?" Vakama began again, proceeding more carefully. He shifted a block, paused, shifted it some more, until he was certain it wouldn't cause a collapse. It took a lot of careful work, but he finally managed to create a big enough opening for Nuri to crawl through. The Matoran was coated in dust, but did not seem hurt. "I thought I would never get out of there," said Nuri. Then he looked up at his rescuer for the first time. "Vakama! You? Are you all right? What are you doing here?" "Okay, why shouldn't I tell you? I came here to learn how to turn a great disc into a mask of power you could never dream of making. Then I would be the one others came to for the important Kanohi." In all the time Vakama had worked as a mask maker, he had never once raised his voice. It had been Nuri who had first hired him as a mask-making apprentice, and Nuri who had taught him the basic skills. But now, as Vakama thought of all he had been through to find the Matoran, he felt anger rise in him. "Look around you, Nuri," the Toa said harshly. "Look at what the Morbizak has done to our city. There is no time to be thinking of personal glory. Everyone has to work together to stop this menace. That great disc you have is the key to saving Metru Nui. I don't know how, but it is. You have to tell me where to find it." Nuri looked shocked. It took him a moment before he could speak, but when he did, his tone was that of Matoran ashamed. "The great disc? I didn't know. Yes, I will gladly help you find it." The two left the house and started walking out of the abandoned zone. Although Nuri spoke under his breath, Vakama could hear him saying, "We'll get the disc, we'll stop the Morbizak. and everyone will know that I saved Metru Nui." The Toa Metru of Fire could only shake his head and walk on.
End of Chapter 3.